Hey, good morning. You want to say good morning?
Good morning.
Chapel team, are you going to use these again? Am I messing this up if I use your music stand? Is it okay? Okay. Wasn't sure. We're really excited to be here. We're glad that Hector can be here. We're glad to tell you what God did. We're not necessarily glad to be on stage, especially me. I find it very, very uncomfortable to be noticed by so many people. But we want you to know what God did. So that's why we're here. And we were going to bring you pictures to show, but there was some difficulties. So we can't show you the pictures. So we're going to tell you a little bit. I'm going to tell part of Hector's story that he can't tell because he doesn't remember it. Yeah. And then we're going to ask some questions, and we're going to let him tell you what he wants you to know also. So Hector and I he's my good helper, and we were working on a project, and we had an accident, and he was hit by a tree, and it was horrible, and we went to the hospital. And do you remember it?
I remember that it took it was 5 weeks until I got out of the hospital. And I was unconscious my dad says I was unconscious for about 8 days.
Depending on how you decide to call it unconscious, because some of the doctors would still call him unconscious. Because his eyes opened, but he wasn't really responding very much. So it was very serious. Could you move?
I couldn't move. My legs were paralyzed, and so my arms.
Yeah, and he wasn't technically paralyzed, but he couldn't move. And the doctors would come in, they'd say, "Wake up, Hector." They would hit him like this, try and get him to wake up. They weren't trying to be mean. They'd come in every morning at 6 a.m. That sounds mean. And they would try and wake him up, and they'd say, "Wake up, Hector, look at me." Did you look at him?
I didn't. I was like, no.
He didn't even open his eyes at all. And he could stir a little bit, but not when you asked him to. They'd say, "Here, come and get my hand." And could you do it?
Nope, I wouldn't. Because I couldn't.
And they would even pinch him and say, "Grab my hand." And he couldn't quite. So he was very, very hurt. Let's see, what else was different? So your eyes are open now, when they weren't then. And you're talking. Were you talking?
I couldn't talk.
Could you get out of bed and walk?
I couldn't.
And how about, what were you wearing? Can you describe what you were wearing in bed?
I wasn't wearing clothes. You may think this is very silly, but I was wearing a diaper.
It may seem silly, but it was really important because he couldn't move. And he's seen the pictures, and there was one thing in particular that he hated that was right here and looked kind of like a piece of armor or like something from Darth Vader's outfit. And I think that you remember that.
I do.
Tell us about what that was.
That was a chin brace or a neck brace, and I was like, just get it off of me. And I was like, stop it. I was like,
yeah, it was right around here, and it held his jaw, so he couldn't really move or talk, even if he wanted to, and it would make it difficult to breathe, difficult to eat. So you couldn't eat with your mouth, and you couldn't move your hands anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did they feed you?
They fed me through a tube in my nose,
Yeah.
which sounds very gross.
Was that uncomfortable?
It hurt.
That hurt? Yeah, so he was very, very uncomfortable, and he couldn't get away from it. And he had a scratch on his head that was very, very itchy, and they covered it with a Band-Aid. And he was pretty well miserable. But he looked like somebody who's sleeping and can't wake up. And that went on for about 8 days. For like 8 days, can you imagine lying still, not being able to talk, not being able to move, not being able to open your eyes or speak or anything for yourself for 8 days? On the 8th day, his brother Peter, who is in the 3rd grade class right over there, can you wave to us, Peter? Peter held up a train. Oh, he's hiding. He held up a train to Hector and said, "Here, look at this." And this being Hector, of course, what did you do?
I looked at it. I could hear, but I could not.
Why would you look up at a train?
Because I knew that I was like, well, you know what I am. I'm the train maniac in our family.
So he's the train maniac, and he looked at the train, and that was the first time he'd opened his eyes, but he still couldn't quite focus them or see very much or even open his lids all the way for a long time. For 2 weeks, I think, we were in the intensive care unit at Children's, and that's where they put you when you're in really serious danger, and they work round the clock, and they watch you at all times. And finally, after about 2 weeks, they let you out, and they took us to a new hospital wing, and he started to have physical therapy. What's therapy? It's a big word.
Therapy is like when you have to learn to like use your muscles and your brain and all sorts of things like that. Like I couldn't talk, I couldn't move my hands very well. I could point, but I couldn't really move my arms up and down. But so it's like brain.
Is it like exercises?
Yeah, it's like exercises and such like that. And it was okay, but I didn't like it.
No, he didn't like it. It's like exercise in school. So even though he's in the hospital, that's what he was doing. It was hard work. They asked him to do things that were really hard, and he really didn't like it. But with therapy, he began to get his balance back, and he could kind of walk, and he could move around a little bit. And like you said, you could point a little bit. They asked him to write things or to color things, and at first it wasn't really great. But he did write a little bit. He even tried writing his name, and even tried writing in cursive, which is amazing for someone who can't talk. And all went well, and he rested long hours through the night for a long time, and then something happened, and there was no more rest. What happened?
I don't remember that.
I remember that. Part of what happens when you get healed from this kind of an injury as part of the process is you become very, very restless. Your body just moves, like you can't sit still. I'm sure all the kindergartners know about that, right? My own little boys know about that. It's hard to sit still for a long time. And he could not sit still. He could not lay still. And he was constantly reaching up to scratch at his little wound on his head like this. And we had to keep taking his hand down. They actually had to tie his hand down to the bed to keep him from picking at things. And they had to put him in a bed that zipped up because he would get out of bed and just try to go walking. But your balance wasn't very good, and so he could have hurt himself really badly. He really wasn't safe to go walking, but he kept thinking to himself,
I'm going to walk either way, even if I actually thought that my doctor was stupid, and I thought I was in a dream.
Yeah, he thought he was in a dream, and he was ready to get out, and he was going to get out by walking. So he would try to get out of bed, and he would try to just walk across the room, walk down the hall. He couldn't walk very well. If I held him, I could kind of steady him, but he'd still sway a lot. It was not safe. And at night, we were afraid to leave him because he could get out and hurt himself. So they put him in a bed that zipped up so he couldn't get out of it. It was like sort of like a little cage.
Awful.
Yeah. But it kept him safe so we could sleep. I was very, very tired for several days and just trying to keep him still. So sometimes it was like I was having to wrestle with him all day long. And that was tough. I bet it was tough for you too.
It was tough because I was like, if it's in a nightmare, there's no reason why not to move and punch people. And I was trying to punch, but I couldn't move my arms.
Yeah. He wasn't in good control. But that passed too. Part of healing, that gets better. Part of what the Lord did for him. And then he was able to walk around a lot. And he would walk nonstop. He was safe enough to walk if we had a belt. What you want to describe how that belt thing worked?
The belt was like, it was a belt that had like it looked like a tail on me. So
Well, that's just because it was longer than needed to fit him. So there was some slack, but it was a big wide belt. What did they do with it?
I'd walk, but they'd have to hold it in case I needed to steady my balance.
Yeah, so I'd have to stand back here and kind of hold on to it while he was walking in case he got tired or slipped, which he did sometimes. But we walk all over. We walked miles and miles and miles through the hospital every day. And then I was tired for a new reason. And we started to do other things. When he was too tired to walk, he got to ride in a wheelchair. So he had a wheelchair, and we'd push that around. And sometimes we'd even go outside and walk around downtown. And we had a little football. Do you remember the football?
I do. In fact, I think I still have it.
Yeah. Well, he had like a little, you want to describe what it looked like?
It was a little football. It was about half a foot long or something. And it was like colored and had like bumps on it so I could feel it. Because my nerves wouldn't work, so I couldn't feel things. Like, I couldn't feel that I was on the floor or anything like that.
Yeah, it was hard for him to get the nerves to make connections all the way from his brain out to his hands and his feet. But he had a little football, and it would light up when you threw it. And so we would take it outside, and we would throw it back and forth, which was a lot of fun. And you were really good at it for someone who still couldn't open his eyes all the way. And I would stand way over here, and I would throw it sideways to him, and then I would move to a different spot. And I wouldn't say anything. And he would throw it right at me. I would even sometimes give it to him, and then I walk behind him. And he would throw it backwards to try and get it to me. So he was really doing well, even though it was like he couldn't talk to us, and he couldn't tell us how he was feeling, and he couldn't open his eyes all the way, but he was all there. He was just sort of trapped. And it was a long time to help him get better, and the Lord really helped him. We prayed a lot, and many of you prayed a lot. And I wanted to show you one picture, which was hundreds and hundreds of letters and gifts and cards, and many of them were from you. And do you still have those?
I think I still have them in your room. You probably hid them from me.
I didn't hide them. Anyway, we have a big box. We have a big box of them. We've gone through them. We've read them. There are so many, many hundreds of them. And so many people who prayed for you and who wanted to encourage you and wanted you to know that they cared for you, and they did things to help us. They brought Mr. Marvin, who sometimes comes and subs up here at the school. I remember one time he brought fruit for Gabrielle and I to eat because we were stuck in the hospital and hospital food.
Doesn't taste very good.
Say it again.
It doesn't taste so good. It tastes like mush.
A little bit. It wasn't that bad, but fresh fruit was really nice. And people would sometimes come and they would just come to visit, and it meant a lot to us. And I wanted to thank you for that. And I wanted you to know that those little gifts of your time or your cards are really special and really encouraging. And they helped us when we were very discouraged. That time's getting on. But Hector is so well now that you can talk. Although you were quiet for a month, he didn't start to talk again until his birthday.
My first word was on my birthday.
What was your first word?
It was Mom. And I said it very slow. I was like trying to do it, and I was like, Mom. And it sounded hilarious.
Do you remember that?
I do.
And is it easier to talk now?
Much easier. In fact, I'm going to talk faster.
Do you think you're all healed up?
Mostly.
Yeah. And what are your plans? Short-term plans.
Short term? I don't have short-term plans.
Okay. Well, our plan is that he'll get to come back and be with his classmates in January. And so while you're up here at school, you're sitting at home watching TV, right?
No, I'm not. I'm outside. I'm running around and swinging and doing all sorts of fun.
Do you have any work?
I have work.
Like?
Washing dishes and loading them.
That's not what I mean. I mean work to get you ready to go back to school.
Oh, yeah, I'm doing homeschool.
So what sort of things do you study at home when you're doing your homework or your school?
I study, like history that I don't remember as much. So there's history, we haven't done science, and all sorts of different stuff like history, Bible, history.
Do you have to do Latin?
I do, which I don't like.
And you're working on your math, right?
Yes, I am working on math.
So we're so glad. And I just want to tell you, before I'm done with my part, I want to tell you, especially all you little people, I want you to know that when someone's having a tough time, when someone's in trouble, when someone's in the hospital or sick, it means a lot, and it's really special when you just come to visit or send a picture about whatever, or a note about anything. It's really kind, and we were really blessed by those things. The Lord used those things so that we would know that He loved us because you loved us. And you can do the same thing for other people. You can show them that God loves them by giving them a little bit of your time, or a little note, or a little picture, or just some news about something outside the hospital. All right, Hector, you wanted to share something with us from the Psalm.
I have a psalm. It's Psalm 98. I'll read it. O sing unto the Lord a new song, for he has done wonderful things. His right hand and his holy arm have gained the victory for him. And that's the psalm I want to talk about. The psalm it makes me think a lot about what happened. So I felt miserable, like totally miserable. And then I realized when I got home, that God had taken me out of this, prison that felt like it. And I was so happy, and I wanted to sing, but I couldn't. So.
He did dance.
I did.
I wanted to show you all the video of him dancing. It was before he could even talk, and while we were still worried about whether or not he could walk steadily. And one afternoon, I think it was the second or third day we were home.
It was the second.
Yeah, it was the second. I don't know, because you couldn't tell me. I thought that maybe he was so excited to be home. He just broke out into dancing and clapping at the same time. It was really, really remarkable. We were really glad to see that. What else what would you tell, let's see, I guess we got to share this, don't we? What would you say to someone, maybe there's someone here, who's in trouble, deep trouble, or really scary things? What would you tell them that you've learned from having gone through such a tough time?
I would tell them that I had a tough time, and I know what it means to be in a lot of trouble, like having to, there's a lot of things that could happen. I couldn't speak. I couldn't really do anything that I wanted to do. I was so annoyed. I felt like I was like, well, if this is a nightmare, I should be able to do something. And
But what would you tell them if they're really discouraged or worried? Is there any help for them? Things turned out well for you, but what if they don't feel like it's going to get better for them? What can you tell them to encourage them?
Has God, any of you, has God taken care of what happened to you? Like if you broke your leg and it took a long time to heal, did he help you and heal it? Anybody? That means God cares for you. Even the smallest thing. He doesn't just do it for the big things like saving $1 billion. He does it for the tiny things as well.
So you're saying that even if I'm not in the hospital with a life-threatening problem, maybe I just have a small problem. Maybe I just have a spelling test today, and I'm really worried about that. But it seems really small. Does God only care about people who are in serious danger in the hospital?
No, he cares about things that even if you have, even if you have a spelling test, you just pray to God and he'll help you if you study and all that. There's no reason to be afraid because God's the one who helps.
Yeah, what have you learned about trusting the Lord? You've had a lot to trust him for, a lot of serious circumstances. What have you learned about trusting the Lord through this?
I learned that you can trust him for anything because when I got hurt and had all that happen, now I look at God in a different perspective. And I used to just think, oh, cool, he's the guy who gives you everything you want. But he's not. He's the one who heals you. He doesn't do what you want. He does what's best for you. All sorts of things. Sometimes I want, let's just say I want a gun. And I pray to God for a gun.
Every boy wants a gun, right?
So I just ask him and pray for him for a gun. And I might pray for 2 years and I might not get a gun. And maybe it's because that God doesn't want me to have a gun.
Yeah. Maybe it's not always the best thing. But what can we trust the Lord to give us the best things?
We always can trust him for the best things. It doesn't matter about if it's food, candy, or anything like that.
That's right. Well, I wonder too if you could tell all these kids here. I mean, maybe they haven't experienced anything really tough. Maybe they haven't had a chance to trust the Lord yet, or really seen anything scary. How can they bless other people who are in trouble? What could they do?
They could write a note. They could write a note like, please, I hope you feel better, things like that. And they don't have to do like enormous things. Like they don't have to like send them $5,000, but they can send them they can just give them a note.
Yeah, sometimes a note is just nice. Sometimes it just shows your concern for someone. Well, I think we're about done. And it's been good to share with you and tell you what God has done. And do you have any last words for them?
I do.
Yes.
I have one thing. Okay, listen to this. I wanted things. If you've ever heard of a saying, the cup is half full, and you want it's half full or half empty. I was looking at it half empty, not half full. I wasn't thankful for the gifts that I do have, but I kept looking at the empty part of it instead of the full part, and I have a lot of things that I can use, but God filled the cup all the way up, and I have what I want.
And is that just all kinds of candy and fun toys? And what's the best thing to want?
God's love is what you want. But I do have another thing. In fact, I want to show you it.
Oh, he's very excited about something. This is a big deal. Do you want to go and get it? So one of the things he could not do and was not allowed to do for many, many months has been to ride his bike or anything like that. And he's had to be in therapy. And the good news is that you're done with therapy, and we want to show you this. He's very excited that he is allowed to use these. So, anyway, we're very glad to be returning to many things, but we're not all going back the same, are we? You're different than you were.
Much different than I was.
And I think one way that we're different is that I trust the Lord a lot more. And the Lord has done such amazing things for us that I've learned to trust him about a lot of things, big things, small things, in a new way. And you have too, haven't you?
I have learned a lot about it.
Is the Lord good?
He's wonderful. He's not just the person, if you do wrong, he's not the one who just says, no, you did it wrong, you can't have candy, or something like that. He's not like your mom and dad. He's the one who does everything wonderful.
That's right. The Lord does everything wonderful. And that's why we wanted to tell you what the Lord had done, and make known what he'd done for us, what he's done for Hector, and how he's saved and healed and redeemed him, and how he heard your prayers, and how he is a good God. He's the only God, right? The other gods are just nonsense. There's nothing else worth worshiping. There's no one else worth trusting like the Lord. And that's what we want to encourage you with.